This is the 5th take of this video, and it's 2 days after I had to scrap the review section, and then I posted the video for y'all. Y'all saw into my brain. And anyway, so yeah, I'm wearing the same clothes. Because I basically wear the same 3 days in a row, and then I shower, I put on the outfit, wear it. Then the next day I wear it for the morning, and then I shower. So I do shower. But I do wear the same outfit for like 3 days. Anyway, we're going to get into this. This is the Buzzwordathon wrap up, where I read books that fell under the prompt, which was read books with life or death in the title, or small variations such as living or dead. So that's what I did. And I prioritized my physical TBR and got to some Packlist books. Man, one of these books, I pre-ordered it in 2015 and I hadn't read it yet. So I finally read it. I listened to the audiobook, so we're going to talk about that. First, I want to talk about What the Dead Know. I actually read this one in December. It's like a 30-page book. I listened to it in audio. Now, I'm going to put that in the I prefer my pets category, because though I think that the horror element and the paranormal element were done well, and that the concept was unique and very interesting, the writing itself was hard for me to grasp the first time around. It's not that any of the language used was difficult. It was almost like the breakneck pacing didn't allow me enough time to process what I was reading. So I actually had to re-listen to most of the audio, at least half an hour worth. And this was only like an hour-long audiobook. So that's a lot. And I was having a major sense of deja vu, like I'd already read the story. So this was despite having already read the story. Because by the time I got to the end, I was like, yeah, I am like 90% sure I read this a couple years ago. And still had been lost to the point of having to reread half of the story. So briefly, what this one is about is a group of women who perform these seances to contact the dead and provide some closure to the patrons that pay money to have this service done for them. However, the whole thing is faked. Basically, the patrons will ask a question, wanting to know something about the loved one or find, solace. And the women will then, if they believe they have a cookie cutter response for them, will choke up a pebble with that response that they've already previously hidden in their mouth. So we know that this is fake the whole time because we're in the head of one of these women. However, when a question is asked about the murder of a girl, they all know that they don't have an answer for that hidden in their mouth. However, our main character begins to choke. Everyone's like, what is going on? The guy that arranges everything and finds these patrons is like, oh, it's all part of the process. She's fine. She's choking to death. She winds up choking up an answer that she knows she didn't have. So that introduces the first paranormal element into the story. And you're like, ooh, what is going on here? So I did like the paranormal and horror elements, but the writing style and the not being able to retain the information the first time around is what caused me to put it in I Prefer My Pets. All right, next up we have Life and Death by Stephenie Meyer. So this looks like a huge chunker, but it's really not, because it has Life and Death on this side and it has Twilight on this side. I did not reread Twilight. I've never reread Twilight, despite being a huge Twilight fangirl. I'm like the same age as Kristen Stewart. Kristen. I keep wanting to call her Kirsten. I don't know why I'm doing that. Kristen Stewart. I was following her since she was like 10 years old, because I was like the same age. She was in Panic Room, and I thought she did awesome with that movie. I think she was alongside like Jodie Foster. But anyway, so I was big on the whole Twilight thing, which is funny because my friend's the one that got me to watch the first movie. And I had told her I thought it was going to be super cheesy and I wouldn't like it. And she's like, just trust me. And I watched it 3 times in a row that night. So I watched the extended edition, the regular standard edition, and I watched the director's cut with commentary. In one night. I was obsessed. But that is part of the reason that Life and Death is only going to be in the middle. I guess you'll do an XOXO. Because though that was my experience with the original Twilight when I read it as an 18-year-old girl, that was not my experience with Life and Death as a 32-year-old. I did not get the same warm and fuzzies that I got from that one. I still excused the fact that Edith in this book was basically, not even basically, like she was stalking Bella. She was watching her in her sleep, all right? And I also excused the whole age thing because Edith in this book is technically over 100 years old and interested in a 17-year-old. If this was not a paranormal book, I would not be okay with any of that. But because it was paranormal and I really had to think on it, and I was like, if I were Edith and I had never been fascinated by another human being and wanted any sort of relationship with them, and it had been 100 years, and I finally felt a connection to someone and had the ability to be able to observe them without getting caught or causing them any sort of discomfort because they wouldn't know, yeah, I would still definitely be breaking that boundary. But I would probably do it. I would probably do it. And I think if most people were like, if you're in this paranormal thing, there's no consequence for Edith for doing this. And so I'm like, I can't honestly say that I would be, if I was this vampire, that I would have not done that. Especially because they can't sleep. So what are they supposed to do for entertainment? So definitely red flags. I'm not excusing them. I'm just letting you know it didn't bother me. 2 of the things I would point out that might bother some readers. The Quillette that are in here. I didn't know this, even while reading this book, that's an actual tribe. I thought she made up a fictional one, and that Native Americans in general, some of them were just upset by her coming up with like this legend to attach to a tribe and then using it. But that's not the case. It was a real tribe and a real legend from that tribe where she did very minimal research and kind of just used the legend and made her own little world based off of those elements without actually talking to anyone from the tribe itself. So I can definitely see why some readers are going to be like, no, I'm not even going to read that because that's appropriation. The other thing in here that's interesting is the fact that all of the characters are gender bent except for Renee and Charlie. Now, in one of her notes from the author, she explains why, but to me, it just wasn't a good excuse. And there's also the fact that she didn't gender bend Renee's husband. And the only reason to have not done that, even if she had kept Renee as a woman, would be to avoid having a female-female relationship. Not that I think that Stephenie Meyer should be the one to write one of those, because if she didn't do due diligence with the Native American representation, I don't know that I would trust that she would do the due diligence with an LGBT couple, even though they're not really present in the story. But yeah, I was like, I would have liked to have seen Charlie's character as a woman in power, the sheriff of a town, who also has more of a stoic and reserved personality, because there are women like that. Not all women are super bubbly. And then with Renee's character, it's okay to have a guy that is not very responsible. that can't pay their own bills and basically has their child raise them and take care of them and act as a parent to them, even though they're the child. So I think that could have been good to go ahead and flip that, because you flipped all of the rest of the characters. So that's kind of my say on this. I just didn't get the ooey gooeys that I got with the original Twilight, because I'm much older now. And, yeah, I had more hormones when I was 18 years old, and I just don't have those anymore. It's harder to get my stomach flipping now than it was when I was 18 years old, is basically what I'm saying. But anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about with that book, so that's out of the way. And we're going to move on to the next book, which is Future Home of the Living God. I'm also going to be, I'm going to be putting that one on I Guess You'll Do. This was my lowest rated book at 3 stars for the month of January. There are some elements in the story that I'm sure some readers will not like at all or find slightly confusing. Those reasons didn't really have an effect with my rating. I'm using the compile. So even if there's stuff in a book where I'm like, I don't really like this element, or I don't like this character, or something like that, it's only really going to get docked like 1 or 2 points out of 10. And there's 6 sections, so it doesn't have a big effect at all. I gave one book a 6 in a category out of 10, and it still got a 5-star because all the other elements were high up. So I like the scale. It's doing me well. At no point did I want to DNF this book, which is why I finished it, even though it was only a 3-star. The Twilight was a 3.5. The Life and Death, I remember that. But yeah, so this one is about everybody freaking out. It's slightly futuristic, and they're freaking out because evolution, something has gone wrong, and so everyone's regressing. And so one of the things that I think could be interesting, where some readers are not going to like it, is the fact that this book heavily relies on this whole like reverse evolution, as in humans digressing back into apes. So if you don't believe that humans evolved from apes, then you might not like this story. To me, it was just a little strange. Not that this person had that thought, because I know a lot of people have that thought. And it is an interesting concept to see what would happen if that were to be the case and regressing into apes and stuff. But the fact that the person is also Catholic, and I would assume that most people of Abrahamic religions would believe in either solely creationism or a mixture of the two, but not the monkey thing. Because I was talking to my friend about this, because she does believe that we evolved from like apes or whatever. My own personal belief is a mixture of science and creationism, because I am a Christian, and so I could definitely see that we have evolved in some ways. So our current human form was probably not the human form we had previously, but I don't believe we came from apes. But again, that didn't really affect my thing. But what was I saying? What was I saying? Oh yeah. So so with the faith thing, I would think that it would either be something like with mine, where it's like, yes, I accept science as science, but also can blend that with the creationism aspect. But I was surprised that this one was like very gung-ho about the ape thing, despite having the religion. So I just didn't get the juxtaposition of that. I have OCD, so things that don't fit in boxes confuse me. I am slowly learning, which is why I continue to read the book, even though initially I was like, what? Anyway, this also has a Native American character, and this was narrated by the author. I thought all of that stuff was super interesting. This one does very much so read like a literary dystopian sci-fi novel. So if you like stuff from like Emily St. Mandel, I think that you would really enjoy this. The writing style is almost feels like second person because they are writing to their future child. And so they're saying you all the time. And the whole thing is like letter style. There is the whole thing with women having to submit themselves to the government for observation during their pregnancy because some of the women are having very difficult births because they're having these like mutated human beings. So they want to be able to look over them, but also for the humans that are still able to have what you expect a human to be, and not like a mutated regression in humans, then they're going to want to have the child for themselves and probably raise up because they're so afraid of the regression because they're like, if we regress, we're not going to have the same intellect that we do now. So society is going to crumble as a whole. People are already kind of losing their creativity. So the arts are going to wind up going away. And it's basically going to be a complete reset. So people are really fearful of that. Well, our main character is pregnant. And so we're like, is she going to get turned in? Is she going to get kidnapped? Because if you don't turn yourself in and someone reports you, they take you. And we also get to see her family reactions. She was adopted, but she's known her whole life that she was adopted because she is biracial, so she can physically tell a difference. And so when her biological mother writes her a letter wanting to meet her, she wants to know more about her culture and the things that she missed out on, not being able to relate to other people from the same background as her because she didn't grow up in that setting. So I found all of that very interesting. Literary is not my preferred genre to begin with. And one of the reasons for that, especially when it comes to like the sci-fi dystopian stuff, the same issue that I kind of had with Emily St. Mandel's book, Station 11, was that it doesn't go as far as I want it to go, and the endings don't feel satisfying. They don't feel as epic as a regular genre fiction book. So that's why I put it in the I guess you'll do. I wanted something more satisfying. I will say that there were two parts of this book that I like absolutely enjoyed and would read those sections again. And they are further along in the story, so I don't want to give you a lot of details. But one of them is where I'll put it as blankly as I can. They want to get out of a bad situation, so they have to take things into their own hands and do things they never thought that they would do. I'll leave it with that. So that one was really good. And then the betrayal moment, that one was really good too. So that's all I really have to say about this book. If you want to read it and you like literary, and especially if you do believe we came from apes and stuff, I think you'll really, really enjoy this book. But I'm not a literary girly. Not yet. Not yet. I'm trying with the classics. Maybe literary and historical fiction will be next. I'm always trying to grow in all areas. But that's what I have to say about that one. Moving on to lighter text. Not really, though. We have My Life Next Door by Huntley Fitzpatrick. So, sad thing about this is that the author has passed. I can't remember what it was that she died from. It was like a medical thing, but it's very sad. So they had like 2 or 3 books out, and I do have another book by them. So I will definitely want to read that, because this one, be mine, 5 stars. I listened to the audio with it, and it was just so good. So it's about these kids, their next door neighbors. Her mom is a politician and has always looked down on his family, but they start to get to know each other, and they're hanging out, and they fall for each other. Like, it's a romance. You know this. However, something happens where she has to keep a secret, because if she doesn't keep the secret, she could lose him. But if she does expose the secret, it is going to completely upend her entire life and her relationship with the person whose secret she's keeping. And that's honestly all I can really tell you without giving you any spoilers. But boy, was this an emotional ride. Highly recommend checking it out if any of that sounds interesting to you. But, emotional. Then we have the death of Mrs. Westaway. So, if you like, I've not read this book yet, but I've watched several reviews, The Inheritance Games, or a book that I have read, The Westing Game. I think you'll like this, by Ruth Ware, The Death of Mrs. Westaway. This woman, she is like a fortune teller. She does tarot readings. She's learned how to read people. Sometimes she gives them actual meanings of what the cards say. Sometimes she gives them what she thinks they want to hear. And she kind of like stacks the deck in her favor to be able to do so they feel like the reading is authentic. Well, she gets a summons in the mail to tell her that she's in the wheel of this person. So she should show up for this. Now, I was doing research about wills, because wills are going to be in the book that I'm currently working on. And apparently there is no official sit down reading of the will. That doesn't exist. They do it in movies and they do it in books, but it's not a real thing. There's an executor of an estate who is in charge of distributing whatever the stuff is. So they could technically call people together to do that, but they have a certain amount of time to kind of be able to dish out all the different stuff. And then they get paid. They get paid a percentage of the worth of the stuff that they're distributing. So they make money from being an executor. That's very interesting. But she gets this summons. She looks up this woman's house. It is this huge, gigantic mansion. She's lost her mother. She's basically been surviving on her own for the past couple of years. I think she's about to get evicted. It's just a really crappy situation for her. So when she gets the summons, she knows that she's not the same woman that they're trying to contact, but they have the same name. So she's like, all right, I'm just going to get a fake ID to go with this. And I'm just going to read these people. If anybody can pull this off, it's going to be me. And heck, I deserve to have a little win in my life and get some money. So she goes and she meets the family and she starts to really like the family. So that complicates situations. And then she starts to wonder, she's trying to really convince herself that maybe she really is the right person that's supposed to be there. Even though the mother that was mentioned with the birth certificate, because she had to bring a birth certificate to prove who she was not the name of her mother. So she was like, what's going on here? I really liked this. There's a dramatic ending as well. And so sometimes Ruth Ware kind of leaves you where you have to take that last scene and kind of extend it for you to make up the rest of the story to feel like you got resolution. This one you actually get resolution. So I really enjoyed this. I listened to it on audiobook and I am going to give it the top of XOXO. It was a very satisfying read. Then we have Firstlife by Gena Showalter. And this one, honestly, very forgettable. So everybody has to choose which side they want to go when they die. And there's basically people who kind of recruit you until you make a decision. Most people make a decision based off of wherever their parents have already submitted themselves to. And the parents kind of like how Christians have a, what do you call it? Like a christening where the parents are basically dedicating their child's life to God and like handing over the authority to God through the ceremony. With this, the same sort of thing is happening where parents are like, my child will be in this thing. But this child doesn't want to choose because they see the merits of both sides. And they don't like people who don't want to choose. So they send a guy after her to try to convince her to go to one side. And then they have another guy after her trying to convince her to go to the other. So basically they're trying to have her fall in love with them and then sign on to their side. So they both have reasons for trying to start a relationship with her. So that was interesting. But I just didn't really care. So I'm going to put it in, I prefer my pets. I prefer my pets. It was an interesting read. I don't regret reading it, but it's already so forgettable that the details I gave you are really all I can remember. And I read this in January. Like, come on. So, yeah, I am going to wind up unhauling that book. I listened to the audio of it. I'm going to wind up unhauling it. It was not a great book. And I don't want to continue to read books that are mediocre, in my opinion. And that leads me to the next book, which is Lifeblood, which is book 2 in the series, which I'm DNFing and unhauling as well, because I don't have time to read books that are not going to be 4 or 5 stars. And if the first book wasn't epic, second book usually has that second book syndrome where it slows down and gets really boring. And I feel like I would already have to reread book 1 to read this, and that's just not going to happen. Plus, there's a third book, I believe it's called Everblood, and I'm just like, I'm not dedicating another, 20 hours of my life to read these next 2 books that I know probably are not going to be 5 stars, so I'm going to DNF and get rid of it. Alright, and then we have Generation Dead. So I started this last year, and I finally finished it this year. I believe I actually finished this in December, so it was one of the last books that I read of the year. And so I enjoyed it. I feel like there is so much allegory in the story. You can basically take any oppressed or ostracized group in society and lump them into this storyline, and it'll make sense. So in Generation Dead, the teenagers, sometimes when they die, they come back as the living dead. So they are basically zombies, but they don't eat human flesh. They don't go after your brains, but they are dead. Some of them are very slow in their manner, as in their movements are slow. They're very slow to speak. Their thinking processes are very choppy sometimes, and you get to see that in book 2. Especially you get to see that in book 2 because we get a POV from one of the characters that is the undead. So some of society is like, we need to lock these people up. They're not human anymore. The government does not give them any rights as undead because they only had rights when they were living. Some people, because they don't want them to exist, they commit hate crimes against them and literally murder. They literally murder them. And we're talking teenagers carrying out this, not just adults. So they're in high school, and Tommy, which is one of the undead boys, who is a little bit faster in manner and speech, decides that he wants to join the football team. And he also develops a crush on our main girl character, Phoebe. And so Phoebe has always been kind of looked at as the weird outcast goth girl. And she is very accepting of all of the undead. There's also a program where the undead meet with the living, and they try to talk about the issues that they're facing in society, how the living people can be better allies and understand them, and also how they're going to change the opinions of the rest of the world. Tommy writes a blog called My So-Called Life or something like that, or my Undead Life, something like that. And so, yeah, the organization really likes that he's humanizing the undead. But also Phoebe, one of her female best friends, died 2 years ago and came back. And the first night they were scared by her, so she didn't reach out to them again. So she's been very quiet, and they just haven't really had their trio friendship since the girl died. So Phoebe signs on to be part of this program, and she starts dating Tommy, which gets a lot of backlash, because people are like, "Why you, a living girl? Why would you ever be interested in a dead boy? Like, there's nothing great with that." They also talk about political correctness when it comes to the undead, so they use different terminology throughout. And so the zombies themselves, they do call themselves zombies, or they call themselves the dead or the undead. But then the other thing is like the differently biotic, which was interesting to me because people have done the same thing with the disabled community, and they have tried to use, like, I guess what you would call softened phrases that make them feel more comfortable, but the people that it actually applies to didn't ask for that, and they find it weird. Because it's like, it's more othering to try to sugarcoat the reality of what it is. And so I was kind of like rolling my eyes with that, and I was like, please don't tell me that you're using this allegory to push differently abled, because I'm disabled myself. I am my disabilities don't affect a lot. I have friends whose disabilities do affect every single element of their life. And they always are rolling their eyes at these new terms people come up with. They're like, just say disabled already, it's fine. So anyway, but I really liked the amount of thinking that I did while reading this paranormal YA story, because I was reading a lot of societal modern things into this. But also, this book came out a long time ago. 2008. So the fact that he was attempting to kind of create an allegory where you could throw in race, you could throw in sexuality, you could throw in disability, you could throw in whatever you wanted to, and you would read into it in here and get something from it. So it's not necessarily about the book and the plotline itself, it's about all the messages that are within the story, that you can take away from it. So I really appreciated that, and I enjoyed this story so much so I am going to give it the top of XOXO. And I am going to do a little better into Be Mine for Kiss of Life, which is the second book in the Generation Wars. Is it Generation? No, Generation Dead. I was like, Generation Wars, that's the series title of one of my series. I was like, someone else have it? No, it's Generation Dead. I'm good. So anyway, this one is the follow-up to the epic ending of the first book. You are going to get a POV of a character who in the first book was living and is now unliving in this book. I really liked getting to see that. The when they come back, it is a process. It's like learning to walk again. So they're learning to talk again. They're learning to think again in ways. So they go from their choppy, like 3-word things. Like there's no Sam character, but it would be like Sam run kitchen, drink, water, mom, cook, spaghetti. Like that's kind of how they think in the beginning, but then they slowly get like more speech. One of our characters in here, they do a sport, and again, I'm keeping it vague, so I'm not spoiling anything. They do a sport, and the person that teaches this sport is very, very patient with trying to get them to progress further along so that they can better function within the framework of the current situation. Also, the hate crime. My phone, the alarm had to go off on my last book. I wouldn't have had to edit anything. Now I have to edit them together, but I guess it's fine. That's easy. Just put the 2 clips in and be done. But what I was saying before my phone so rudely interrupted me, because I've been up since 4:30, so I didn't need my 7 a.m. alarm. But anyway, trying to get up earlier in the morning so I actually get stuff done. But anyway, the hate crimes increase. Not only that, but people are masquerading as the zombies in order to perform hate crimes so that people hate the zombies more. To the point where zombies who do not have a living guardian basically get their livelihood taken away from them. So they're still living, they're not killing them, but they're isolating them. At one point, they're not allowed to go to school anymore, which was very sad. So, yeah, just seeing the level of stuff that's doing. You also get to see that the people that also claim to be on the progressive side of things have nefarious reasons and ulterior motives for doing so. They have ulterior motives, and those motives get exposed toward the end of this book. And the isolation and restrictions that are put on the undead continue to increase to the point where a lot of them go into hiding. So that is what you get from this book. So that's me telling you the whole book without actually really spoiling anything. So I am excited for the 3rd book. I do own the 3rd book, so I'm planning to read it fairly soon. I have still not touched any of my books from the last video of Dice of Chaos. The reason for that being is that I have 2 books from the library. I don't know if I'm going to read the second one. I've been wanting to read it, Little Meat Cute. But I'm really trying to focus on my physically owned books. However, the other book, Every Window Filled with Light, is by my librarian, and I am hosting the book club discussion for that at the library in April. And there may be an issue with having enough copies available for everyone to read it. So I'm reading it ahead of time so that I can take notes and kind of structure it, and then have that copy back at the library so people can check it out and be able to have it read before the date that we read it. Because it's like the 3rd Tuesday of every month is when we have the meeting. So it's not really that far away, considering I'm a slow reader and it is a physical book. Really enjoying it. It's like a Christian women's fiction with romantic elements and a big plotline on forgiveness, because the main character's husband was murdered by a teenager, and now that teenager is out of juvie. I'll show you the cover real quick. This one. And she also finds a girl who was being physically abused by her parental figures. So there's her mother and her mother's abusive boyfriend, and she's been neglected. And so the librarian, that's the main character in this, finds her sleeping in a crafts closet. This is like the 1st chapter, by the way. at night. So then she calls the police and CPS, but she's already been through all of the foster care training before her husband died. So she had like 1 or 2 days before her license was going to expire. So she gets her recertifies, which is like you take a test and it's like a couple hours of stuff. And she's able to take in this child temporarily until they can find the mom. But the child's not being very cooperative with giving them information. And the chapter that I left off on, you find out why she's not giving information. And I'm like, woo! So yeah, I'm really, really enjoying this book. But anyway, that wasn't part of this video, but I gave it to you anyway. So yeah, that is my conclusion for this. And here's all the books that I read. Oh, except for Life and Death, but technically it's going off my TBR, so I call it a win. I call it a win. It's going off my TBR. So not Life and Death. You know what I mean. The whatever Lifeblood, whatever it was called. So anyway, chair squeaking on me. But there you go. I'm on a book buying ban. I still kind of do it with 99-cent ebooks every once in a while, even though I am like legit broke. But especially now because I ain't got no job. But y'all want to hire me for editing or formatting services, I can do that. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. So I do want to read the third book in the series, which is Passing Strange, which would work as well for a Buzzwordathon prompts because February's prompts are verbs. So I want to do that, but then the fourth book I don't own. So I'll have to buy a physical copy. But my husband's already started asking me what I want for my birthday, so I really need to read the third book. And then if I enjoy it enough, I'll tell him to get me the fourth book, like a used copy, for my birthday. And then maybe some other series continuations if I start series and don't have the next one. Because I'm on a book buying ban for the year. So I can only get physical books if they are sent to me by Goodreads, which I have not been entering any more giveaways. The giveaways are great, but I have so many books. I just don't feel like I need any more giveaways. I'll let someone else win. And I want to focus on reading the books I already have. But this has been a really long video, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for watching. Did you participate in Buzzwordathon? And did you read any of the same books? Different books? I want to know all this stuff. I will see y'all in the next video. And thank you so much for all of the love and support after my last video, because it was very hard to post. So I'm glad that y'all understood that and that y'all took it the way it was meant to be. So that's always my big fear, is that the way the perception, because I'm a very authentic person, but it's just it's happened so many times in my life where people's perception of me is not the same as my perception of myself. And when you don't get to know someone, sometimes it's easy to take that first impression, and I'm an oddball, so those impressions are usually not all that good. But y'all have been amazing, so thank you for being such supportive people. And if y'all want to become closer friends, like join my Discord or something. I don't check it every day, but when I do, I check it. Like I see all the messages. So that's all I have for y'all. Bye.